Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Technical Problems and Terrible Solutions podcast. I'm your host. My name will come eventually. And, well, you're here. You found the podcast. This is an introductory episode. I hope you aren't hoping. I hope you don't have any hope at this point. Because, golly, this podcast will let you down so hard. Like my dad did the one time he threw me. I'm just kidding. I don't have a dad. I'm kidding again. Anyway, so, well, you're here and you're listening. I'm genuinely flattered. I really do thank you from the deepest part of my heart. I give you my word that that's not sarcasm. Trust me, it's hard to tell with some people. Me especially, because well, how would you say, negative sometimes, and yeah, that's generally a pretty applicable adjective to a lot of things. Well, negative to myself, not to other people, most of the time. I don't know, it's hard to tell sometimes. But enough about me. You want to know about the podcast. You're listening, you have time to spend, and you're spending it with me, so let me give you a sales pitch of sorts. Essentially, this podcast is me. It's nobody else. I may have guests. We'll see. I hope to one day. Maybe I'll have friends. Probably not. But for the most part, it's going to be me, and it's going to be me talking about various topics and different things. And I know that sounds really vague, but that's about all it is. And if you think about it, that's all really any podcasts are. But mine doesn't have a central theme around it. But for the most part, if I had to put a label on it, which I kind of have to, think about... Let me see if I put this into words. I try to do this on the spot just because it's more organic. Think about either if you haven't reached this point, or you're way past this point, or you're right at this point now. But I'm at a point in my life where when I wake up and I go through my day, I'm not so sure in my identity of who I am maturity-wise. I don't know if I'm a teenager, or if I'm an adult, or this weird thing called a young adult, or if I even count as that yet. What responsibilities am I supposed to have? What am I supposed to be doing? Is there some important aspect of adulthood I'm not supposed to have? There are different things that I'm supposed to change now that I am an adult. When I was a teenager, all you had to do was just call somebody a dick, and you were best friends with them. And now that I'm an adult, I sometimes can do that. Apparently, like at college, when I went to my orientation, I was able to do that once or twice. The other half of the time, I had to do like some adult networking, which I was kind of good at. But can I do that all the time, or some of the times? The friends that I had in high school, am I still friends with them? Am I not? How does text etiquette work? I'm not superficial enough to use Instagram. How do I become that superficial, or should I? Like, how does this work? And those are essentially, if I had to give you a roundabout way of what I'm trying to talk about, it's that. There's a lot of things that I basically formularized. Whew, that was hard to get out. Friendships, networking, school, homework, social interactions, all that. If not down to an exact science, I at least had a better than 70% chance of knowing what I want to do and making sure I got that outcome. If I wanted to be friends or acquaintances with somebody, I had a pretty good idea about how I could do that. And if I wanted to get a certain grade in a class, or I wanted this something, all I had to do was be like, okay, I need this grade, that grade, this thing, that thing, and bada bing, bada boom, I'm probably going to get this grade, if all things goes to plan. If I didn't like a teacher, all I had to do was just pay attention and be quiet, and raise my hand at the exact right time to where all the early birds would either get the question, or the people who didn't raise their hand would get the question, and I didn't have to answer and have minimal teacher interaction with the teachers that I especially didn't like. I also became a master at throwing shade for teachers that really wanted to interact with me for some reason, so I could get them the message for them to go away. I learned different techniques and different things that I learned when I was thrown out of private school into public school to figure out how to freaking survive. in a social setting, because, to be honest, private school is really one of the worst. Roundabout. Like, it's good foundational material, but please get them out of there before middle school, please. They will not be a good adult. I can't imagine what I would have been like. I would have been 10 times as autistic, to the point where they would have to make a new level of it. Like, my brain would be so differently wired that I probably would only be able to talk to people through derivatives. It would be that bad. So anyway, that big long tangent aside, basically, my formulas aren't working anymore, for lack of a better word. And I say that like I have numbers and stuff that I crunch in order to talk to people. I don't, but I generally had a game plan for how I wanted to do things. And that game plan is not working anymore. It's just straight up not. And high school was the fundamental reason that equation worked. And it's not working anymore. So, needless to say, I need a new game plan, and I need it fast, because college is coming up, and I don't need to be that guy who talks about, or talks the same way as the person who's still in high school, right? Like, maybe I was always ready for it, maybe I'm totally wrong, and being an adult requires a whole new level of thinking that I just can't even imagine as possible. The problem is I don't know, and that's why I made this. To the 10, 20, or 200,000 people that listen to it, hopefully we can ask questions and get answers, because we all need them. But I'm being selfish and, wanting them more. But since this introduction is already only 7 minutes, I guess we could get into a little something or other. Just something real quick, just so that you can, a baby's taste of it, and also to see if this is even worth continuing. Oh my goodness. Well, if it's not too meta for you, and it doesn't feel like too much of a waste of time, making a podcast, I'm just kind of doing it, right? I'm just sitting down with baby's first microphone in a quiet room and recording. And there's gotta be, I don't know what you would call it. Insanity's not quite, craziness, I guess, would be a softer version of insanity. But I'm sitting down and I'm not talking to anybody, but I'm talking to you, right? Or a group of people, if, I'm that entertaining to laugh at. But you have to think that it's kind of weird that people even do this sometimes, because you have to sit down and talk to an audience that for the first episode, or maybe 3 or 4, aren't even there. Like, there's nobody listening. There's nobody listening right now, and nobody may actually find this until weeks, months, maybe years if some soul just punches in the right keyword at the right time and they automatically find it somehow. It's just interesting to think about that, I'm sitting here with a microphone on a table in the middle of an empty room talking to somebody. It's kind of interesting. It takes a certain amount of almost gall. You have to be so full of yourself that you have to think, well, somebody's going to find it eventually because I'm just so great. You have to, I guess, kind of have some version of that thought in your brain. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother sitting down and recording. I mean, I could list off that, oh, well, I'm just doing it just to try it out. But if I'm just trying it out, you wouldn't be listening. I could just record the podcast and be like, well, it sounded good. If I did put it up, it would sound okay. I don't have to put it up in order to, prove that I could theoretically do it. So that excuse kind of goes out the window once people start listening to it. That's also weird, is that this isn't right at this moment as I'm recording. I don't know what I'm going to do. I may not put it up. Something may happen, or, I don't know. It's kind of that weird meta existence, almost like a Schrodinger's cat. For those of you who don't know, Schrodinger's cat is this quantum field experiment where you shut a cat in a box, and they always say poison. So I'm going to say that there's a gun strapped to his head, and you can flip a coin. There's a coin flipping. There's a coin flipping mechanism inside of the box, and you close the box. And if the coin lands on heads, the gun will fire. And if the coin lands on tails, the gun won't fire. So if you close the box and flip the coin, and you don't open the box, until you view it, that cat is both dead and alive in the fact that you don't know until you open the box do you figure out that the cat is dead or not. So in that same way, until somebody pushes play on this podcast, or somebody sees it or finds it, or that time between, maybe it's the time between when I said it or while I'm recording. I guess it's while I'm recording. I wonder when you would pinpoint that exact time, though, when the podcast is either published or not. Maybe it's more of a question of if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound type of deal? If nobody listens to a podcast that's published, how sad of a person are you? The answer is very. So anyway, that little tangent out of the way, what are we at, 12 minutes? We can go a bit longer, I guess. Well, I guess I should go into the creation behind this podcast. I guess I touched on it kind of in a roundabout type of way of me experimenting was the reason for it. And that's true. Essentially, I've done a lot of different things that, needless to say, aren't very socially helpful. That's not the right term. Man, me trying to show off my 1 year of AP English, which is even more sad because I didn't stick in it for the second year. So I'm trying to show off one half the work other people put in, and trying to show off the 1 years of work that other people didn't have to do. Trying to show off how smart I am. Which anybody with a dictionary has the same amount of information. That's why they invented dictionary, excuse me. I was about to name drop somebody. But, if this ever gets to that person's ears, I'd rather I have some sort of deniability. So anyway. But it's not, I do a whole bunch of things that don't require people, and that's mostly because I can go at my own pace. It's kind of hard to practice whitewater rafting by yourself, because that would be called kayaking, and with my luck I'd be stuck upside down and somebody would be like, "Hey look, it's a for kayak."
"Hey, there's a dead body in there."
"Ah, no one will miss him. Throw him back. Let's get the kayak. Let's go. Jimmy needed one. Let's go. Let's go. Jimmy needed one. Let's go. Go, go, go." You're trying to do all these voices. Well, that's a good thing to practice. I suppose that's another thing I could practice, though, since I'm on this podcast, and it's just me. I can be even more crazy and pretend that there are other people here. But anyway. And, I do math, and yeah, I do math. Oh, man. I do math. Yeah, I know. And I really enjoy math just because of the fact that, it's something that you can easily figure out. When you figure out that 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? There's the philosophy of which number equals 2 and what number equals 4, as in, like, you could pick 3 could be equal to 2, and then 3 plus 3 would be equal to 4, because instead of 2, it represents 3. But that's just you trying to screw with it. At the end of the day, 2 sticks plus 2 more sticks gives you a total of 4 sticks. And if you understand that fundamental concept, that's it. There's nothing, I wouldn't say there's nothing more to learn, but you've got a full grasp of the topic, and then that's it, right? You're able to apply that, and universally it will stay true. 10 plus 2 equals 12. 113 plus 72 is equal to 185. Did I just do that right? Did I say 113 plus 72? Oh my gosh, how did I do that? My mom drilled me with flashcards when I was 5. That's how that happened. Man. That's what happened in my childhood. Crap. Dang it. Existential crisis happening. Episode 0. Holy crap. Anyway. All math, right? When you add negative numbers, once you learn that fundamental concept, you're able to apply it universally. When you know that 3 plus negative 2 is equal to 1, you know it's the same as subtraction. Or when you learn subtraction, it stays the same no matter the numbers. And once you know negative numbers exist, you're able to answer the quirky versions of subtraction. If you don't know about negative numbers, you're not going to know what the heck 3 minus 7 is. But once you learn about them, then it makes perfect sense. And once you understand that negative numbers just, that negative 27 is actually less than negative 4, once you understand these fundamental concepts and these basics, you're able to build on them and be like, well, the absolute value of negative 27 is actually more than the absolute value of negative 4. And you take all these different concepts and you build and build and build and build. Once you know adding, you're ready to go into multiplication. Multiplication is just a faster version of adding. 3 times 4 is just adding 3 4 times, right? So that's all multiplication is. Division is a lot harder because it's like a faster version of subtracting, kind of, except for sometimes it's not, but essentially it pretty much is. And then when you go to the square root or by the power and going to the power of something, that's just a faster way to multiply. So when you say 7 squared, right, or 7 to the power of 2, you're saying 7 times 7. And then if you're really stuck and you really don't know, you can break it down and be like, well, 7 times 2, right? Or 7, excuse me, not 7 times. Oh man, I did the thing that you're not supposed to do. Okay, math tip. I might throw these in randomly just because I need an excuse to have all this math knowledge and not yet use it for my degree. When you have something 7 to the power of 2, which is 7 with a smaller version of the number 2 shoved to the top right of the number, that's powers. So that's 7 times 7. That's how many times you multiply the number by itself. So it was 7 to the power of 5 with a tiny number 5 up to the upper right-hand side of the 7. It'd be 7 times 7 times 7 times 7. But that's the beauty of math, is that that's what you could do. As long as you know what that number means, right? 7 to the power of 5 is equal to 7 times 7 times 7. And then if you really, really were just completely stuck at what that meant, you would go, okay, well, 7 times 7 is 7 plus, is adding 7 times. So I would do 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7. So 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, and 49. I stumbled there. So I know that the 7 times 7 is 49. Well, now I've got 49 times 7. Okay, so that's 49 7 times. So 49, 98. I'm not going to be able to do that. But essentially, if you really had enough time and enough paper and enough patience, you would be able to figure out the problem if you broke it all the way down to its essential components. Which is why I like math versus something like English. All of you English people out there, oh my goodness. How? Okay, so let me tell you where I have my difficulty. You go into English class, right? And they're like, this is a period. You put this at the end of a sentence. Okay. What's a sentence? A sentence is a complete thought with a noun and a verb. Okay. Unless it has an object. Okay. You can also have multiple objects per sentence. Okay. You can also have a semicolon instead of a period and have 2 nouns, 2 verbs, 2 objects. Of course, you can also have 2 nouns and 2 verbs, and that's all you really need. Okay. And you can have a colon, but only if the two statements are somehow intertwined with one another. Okay. But don't forget about your prepositional phrases. And then, of course, there's nested prepositional phrases. And then also, if you want to diagram a sentence, you have to, of course, figure out what that object is being referred to, as in what the verb is attached to that object. Okay. So what is the correct way to say something? Oh, well, there's no right way to do it. But there is. But there isn't. Okay, well, I like diagramming sentences. Sorry for everybody who was in English 4 and hated that, but that was the only thing that made exact sense, because diagramming sentences, as boring and sometimes mundane it is, it's essentially deconstructing the English language to where it makes mathematical sense. In other words, you can use diagramming sentences probably in other languages. I could immediately see how in Spanish I could probably be able to deconstruct a Spanish sentence and fit it into the diagramming sentences format because of how it works. It might not work something with, for those of you who don't know, there's things called polymorphous. I think it's polymorphous. Double check me on that. Do not take my word for that. But there are these words. It's poly something. I say polymorphous. Essentially, there's a gradient that they use for languages, and there's languages that divvy up ideas more into concepts. And there's basically two thoughts of language, two categories of language. There's languages that put ideas into individual words, and the other side of the sentence where you need all those individual concepts wrapped in one megalomaniac of a word in order for it to even make sense, but it makes this beautiful, long, continuous thought that's one word. So, and I believe that's called polymorphous, like I said. Again, don't quote my word on that. I'm probably completely wrong. I may add something into the podcast in order to correct myself if I'm wrong. Yeah, you're completely wrong. This is editing me here. Polymorphism refers to something in programming languages where it can communicate with different objects inside of a language, like a programming language, versus what I was actually talking about. The gradient is between synthetic and analytic. Analytic being individual words meaning ideas themselves, and then synthetic meaning you need a whole bunch of the individual components to make up one big huge word. Those are the actual terms, you idiot. Those words may not fit as well into that because, the word itself can't really be deconstructed because it doesn't make sense in its individual components until it's put completely together. But diagramming sentences is like part of linguistics, and that's something, even though I don't like English, linguistics is something that I find really interesting. But anyway, that's why math is far superior to English, is because if I sat down and asked you what's the best way to tell a concept to you, there's debate about what is the correct answer. The prevailing, I think, if I have this right, because I dabbled in, trying to figure out how to write a long time ago. I say a long time ago, a couple years ago, I tried to figure out how to write. And by write, what I mean is make something that's engaging to write, an article or a story or something like that. No, I didn't want to take creative writing because those are cancer. It's like a game design degree. It's like, oh, we're going to teach you how to make the graphics better and stuff. So creative writing is like, oh, we'll teach you how to make a story and all this other stuff. I'm like, I want to just make the writing better. And from what I've heard, creative writing classes specifically don't help you with that. So I did some digging, and the prevailing thought when you're writing is that concise is better, from what I can tell. When you want to say the cat jumped over the bridge, you don't need to say the ferocious feline leaped over the stone structure. But then again, if you feel like those elements, especially in a fictional sense, are more important to the story. Like if you want to focus on the feeling of the cat, you do want to add the adjective ferocious. You want to keep that. Or if you want the setting to be, where a bridge is kind of a weird thing that nobody understands. So you, instead of the main character say, "Oh, that lovely bridge over there," you say, "What is that fantastic art structure?" Instead of saying, well, that's a bad example because, of course, he wouldn't be able to call it a bridge if he didn't know what it was. But let's say bridges were more of a rarity. Let's say, I'm pulling something out of my butt, but let's say you wanted to make a fancy world where waterways were essentially rare, and all of the cities were built on waterways, were the rich cities because that was the main mode of transportation, and you're in medieval times, and let's say a normal country folk wouldn't have any idea what the heck a bridge was, so let's say bridges are more idolized in this culture, like it's on their money or whatever, and it says the magnificent arched structure spanned across the waterway, instead of saying the magnificent bridge. It would make this thing seem more like a rarity, and, bridge, once you bundle a concept or idea into a word, it immediately minimizes itself. So, I just pulled that out of my butt, and that was an extenuous tirade on how that could work. But, there's different ways you can write, is what I'm saying. You can pull anything out of your butt as to why your writing is the way it is. And the only way you can figure out whether or not you're right or not is whether or not people excuse your writing or not, basically. There's a template on how universally people would be okay with your writing, but to say your writing is good or exceptional is basically throwing it to a popular vote of whoever sees your work or reads it, which to me isn't great, because I want to figure out how to objectively write better. How do I objectively write in an engaging way? Should I have this adjective here, or should I rework the structure of this sentence a little bit? Do I really need this prepositional phrase? For those of you who know what I'm talking about, props to you. Be happy about it. I'm not. So, well, I lied, I am. So that's just my major qualm with English, is that there's just, if you can find a way to either BS an excuse for your writing, or other people, smarter people, more respected people, find a way to BS an excuse for your writing, then you're able to do it. And I know I'm minimizing it a little bit, to say that, oh, you're BSing your writing. If there's meaning behind your writing, that's great. But it's kind of weird that sometimes you can get away with the reasoning and sometimes you can't, and it's kind of hard to figure out where that line is about when is the way or the weird quirk you have in your writing justifiable and when is it not. And it's kind of hard to figure that out, when it is and when it isn't, So that's just my major thing. I dabbled in writing for a little bit, so yeah. And then of course there's, the other sciences. Golly, chemistry. I'm going to designate, probably, if I had to make some predictions now, because I think this is a long enough introductory, being about 30 minutes. I probably wasted enough of your time. So I'll close out with this. If you enjoyed this, or at least found it something better to listen to than your local radio, what I can promise you is that I have 3 episodes I definitely want to talk about, for sure. And, you can skip to these episodes or whatever. But I definitely have, I'm about the 30-minute mark roundabout, so I think that's about it. That was a little, taste sample. I don't have any sort of script or anything. If I had a script, I'll probably be a little bit more organized. I hope you enjoyed it all right. I definitely, I enjoyed it myself a little bit. I'll be honest. Maybe I'll start to perk up a little bit after a couple more of these, but let me leave you with this. I live by this motto, which is high hopes, low expectations. And I expect this podcast to last 5-6 episodes, probably. You, obviously, if you're far in the future and you see more than 6, I'm wrong. But I hope it'll be a couple more, and, my expectation is about, let's be reasonable here. 3 people will find it. And, it would be cool if I got 5 people on the first episode and a total of 7 throughout the entire podcast for the 5 episodes I plan to make. This one included, so technically the 4th. I'm just making this prediction now not to be like, let me be transparent. I'm not saying that so that you'll share the podcast and be like, oh, let me prove him wrong. I'm saying that now so that if the podcast does continue, maybe I'll look back and be like, man, I was dead wrong, or man, I was pretty much right, or whatever. And also just to kind of make sure that I internally realize that. Because, sometimes you make something and you get a bit of positive attention, and it's kind of hard to keep that ground wire about, and I hate to be a downer, but what I hate more is when you you get in a plane and you take off and then all of a sudden you dive bomb, versus if you never expected to even get on the plane in the first place and you're halfway to China, if that makes sense. I'm much more of a fan of that mentality. Now, you could say that cripples you a lot, which, to be honest, could be a podcast in and of itself if I make a script, which I will. But in my mind, that's what it is. But those are my expectations. My hopes, well, what's a nice, pretty good number? If I could get about 2 seasons worth, let's say 26 episodes, and 1,000 people total, that to me would be beyond hopes. That would have, something has gone fundamentally wrong with the podcast in all of the best ways, that people have genuinely resonated with a single word that has come out of my mouth with the level of maturity, intelligence, intellect, and public prowess that I have. Like, who uses the word prowess? Who wants to listen to somebody who uses the word prowess? Almost nobody. And I somehow was able to find those people who are able to tolerate somebody like that for an entire car ride, or, when they're busy, just, I guess, doing the dishes. Which, if you are doing the dishes, by the way, I hate to do the dishes. My future wife, if you're listening, if I ever have one, I hope you're happy doing the dishes. Because I will do everything. I will do the laundry, I'll take out the trash, I'll do all the lawn work, I'll do doggone near everything. I'll balance the budget, I'll do everything but the dishes. I will invent a self-cleaning dishwasher machine with my engineering expertise before I touch another dirty dish in my entire life. That's a hope. The expectation is that I'll probably get stuck with the dishes anyway. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This will be where I cut out. From the bottom of my brainstem to the bottom of my heart, I hope that you have a wonderful day. And thank you for tuning in. Have a lovely day.